from China. Joseph.
I'm still, reading all about this cow. Lactating cows it has a lot to do with how many pounds we'll actually eat.
Well, that's the farmer from Missouri wrote in and said there's no way
I read
that number can be right.
But it wasn't our number.
It was in the journal. He said maybe if you add up the milk that you take from them every day too, if you add all of that stuff up, maybe.
All right.
Milk's not exactly the same thing.
Fred Malek is here. He's a Renaissance man. From healthcare to regulatory reform. Washington hot buttons are everywhere these days. Fred, were you in all of your travels and buyouts, ever buy a farm? Know anything about this? Do you know what a Holstein is, or can you help us here with?
Do you want to talk about farm or healthcare or the economy?
We want to be able to talk about anything if we need to. Anyway, you're co-founder and chairman of Thera Lodging, right? Yeah. Also a former campaign manager, we should say, for 41, right? For President George H.W. Bush. Also joining us today, former Vermont governor and DNC chairman Howard Dean. And I know, Howard, you got there's a lot of dairy cows in Vermont, no? Don't you make cheese or something?
There are.
Ben and Jerry's.
Joe, what I want to know, is this a deliberate lead into the discussion of politics?
Howard, honest to God, I love you, but we differ on some things. I almost thought about saying, 148 pounds of manure. That's nothing for a decent politician on a day, right?
This may be a fabrication by the Wall Street Journal. That's a lot.
That is a lot, right? We're wondering. We're equating it to ourselves and our dog, and we can't imagine it.
We don't want to go there.
No.
We already went there. Politics, there's no question about that.
It's a little bit late. Tell me, we haven't talked to you since Sunday night. You wanted a more robust public option, which now I've seen some of these attorneys general. They say, a public option is constitutional, but it's not to force someone to apply. So now I see them pushing a public option. It's very weird. The strange bedfellows. But what are your thoughts since Sunday?
Well, it was a huge victory for the president, obviously. I think the bill still has some fairly significant flaws, but we can work with this. This is what Mitt Romney essentially did in Massachusetts. But it's going to take a long time, but it's going to lead to reforms ultimately. I wouldn't call this bill reform, but I do think it can lead to reforms. What they did was essentially take the existing system in the private sector and add 30 million people. It's going to be expensive. It is going to cover everybody, but it's going to take a lot more work.
You're a doctor too, Governor, and I'm just trying to figure out if you add 30 million people to a system that some would say is already a little bit stretched in terms of, you got a lot of doctors that are leaving the profession and a lot of hospitals that can't seem to make do with their reimbursements. How do you add 30 million more people? You would think utilization is going to go up by these people more than going to the emergency room. Isn't there going to have to be a shortage of supply?
I don't think so. The big problem for shortage of supply is under reimbursement, both by the government and insurance companies. Because the insurance companies have basically cut their reimbursement down to the level of Medicare, which is a really tough problem. But there's money in the bill to fund community health centers, and that's going to be a big mainstay of how Americans get their health care in the future. And they're very, very good for the most part. There's going to be a lot of pressure to allow nurse practitioners to have their own practices. I think that's a good thing. There's already enormous pressure to increase the number of primary care people by paying them better and by getting their loans down. Against this, this is a huge change in the system. I think the system will adapt to it, but it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be some dislocation.
What do you think, Fred?
Well, Governor, let me ask you a couple of questions. You were a governor. You created jobs. You know what it's like to be out there and be in charge. If you were in charge, if you'd won the presidency, would you have started with health care insurance, or would you have started with real reform of health care itself? And the other thing is, do you think this thing is going to hurt us in our job growth? Is it going to cost jobs, as some of these companies are reporting, like we've heard from Verizon, Caterpillar, Medtronic? What do you think about that?
Well, that's going to be interesting. I don't think it is going to hurt jobs for a perverse reason. The only two segments of the economy that have done well and grown in this really bad recession that we've had are the government and health care. And so I think there'll be a job growth,
hence the merger.
But it won't necessarily be in the right. Yeah, hence the merger. It's actually not a merger. This is actually not a government takeover of health care.
So you're going to shift jobs from the private sector to the government and to health care.
Well, it's not. The government always seems, no matter what you do. and healthcare will probably grow as part of this. I think this is going to be a problem. There's not a lot of cost controls in this bill, and they're going to have to be inserted. I think they will be, but it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy.
Governor,